Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today we have another great guest, but first let me begin with a few questions. Have you ever wondered when you'll make more money as a small business? Would you love more time to do the things you want to do outside of your business? Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have true freedom? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're really in for a treat today. Our guest today is Matt Ward. He's the author of the book, The High Five Effect, How to Do Business with People Who Bring You Joy. Matt is an entrepreneur at heart. I've known Matt for a long time now. He built a website agency over the course of 16 years and sold it for 7 figures to someone he met at a networking group. He's a networker. He is a under 40 recipient, a Chamber Small Business Owner of the Year, a Better Business Bureau Torch Award finalist, and a professional member of the National Speakers Association. When he isn't speaking, he's riding his side-by-side ATV through the woods of New England. Is West Virginia, New England? I see you down in West Virginia.
Yeah, I take it all over the country now.
Yeah. Anyhow, please join me in welcoming professional speaker, referral consultant, former Chippendale dancer, Matt Ward.
That's me.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Frank. Hey, high five.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
All right, you got this new book coming out. I certainly want to hear about it. And I know you've been working a lot on it over the course of the, last 18 months or however long. It's been a while. So it's, the high five effect.
Yeah.
Being with people we love to do business with.
Yeah, I think as I really started speaking publicly all over the country and giving the keynote on word of mouth referrals, which is what my primary topic is, I found myself coming back to this idea that we do business with who we know, like, trust, and care about, which you and I have talked about a lot. And it gets to the point where I see time and time again that small business owners, employees, and whatnot, they struggle with this idea that they have to take on these clients because they need the money. And they're just not at the point where they can pick and choose. Mm-hmm. And I think most people left the corporate world and started their own company because they wanted 3 things: more money, more time, and more freedom. And they get none of those in the first 5 years. And people who have talked to me see the life I live, the way in which I live it, the ATVing I do, and the boating I do, the time off I take. And they're like, how can I do that? And the reality is anybody can do that. There's sacrifices you have to make, and it's a choice, right? And so for me, life isn't about money. I need money to do the things I want to do, but it's not about accumulating wealth. And so for me, it is about the freedom. And I define it as doing what I want, when I want, where I want, and how I want, and not having other people control my calendar. That's the most important thing to me. And so that's what I do. And that's the premise by which this book was born, is that I have firmly believed and closed my current keynote with the idea that we should be able to do business with people that we can literally high five and we feel good about, because we all have those clients at some point in our stages of our business where they're difficult. We just don't want to talk to them. We dread the emails we get from them. We're frustrated with the interactions we have from them. They consume our time. They complain about everything. They pay their bills late. And, it's the 80-20 rule, but in reverse, right? It's 20% of your clients taking up 80% of your time. And so if you start pruning that, you'll get down to the bare bones of what you really need, what you want, and what you can work with. And those relationships are what's going to matter. This book, Frank, is all about finding your ideal client and matching that up. They fit in this thing I put in the book called the Ideal Client Matrix, which is how well does a client bring you joy and how focused, how relationship driven they are versus transaction driven, right? When you have a relationship driven person who also brings you joy, you have an ideal client.
Right. I've thought about this, not necessarily your book, but this whole concept. And so I was excited when you were coming out with and working on it, I should say. Because I remember when I went into the private practice of law, there was a guy who left 6 months ahead of me. And I started out in a spare room of our house. And I remember it was December 31st, 1994 was my last day corporate. I went to Staples or maybe Office Max, one of the two. They're the same thing. And I'm like, okay, I got to buy a desk. And there was a table there for $29. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just spend $29. I'll get a desk when I'm can afford a desk. Mm-hmm. And I'm still using that table somewhere, here somewhere, right? And I've never really bought the desk. But my friend, when he started, he bought a desk. He bought a whole office suite. He rented a house, had an assistant, a receptionist, and had a paralegal. And he told me, he said, Frank, I need $5,000 a month just to break even. And so he had to literally take everything that came through the door. Whereas me, I turned away things right from the get-go. And I didn't have your matrix, and the whole notion of, money was important. I wanted to be successful. But I guess the point I'm driving at is you really have to start with the end in mind. You have to start thinking about this before you even get going, because so many people, as my friend did, painted himself into a corner where you have to take everything. And I didn't.
Yeah. And I think that when you have people that have the quote unquote side hustle, right? They're working a job and they have a side hustle and they're trying to make the side hustle be the full-time job. They don't, as the side hustle, they don't have to take everything because they have income. And so many small businesses are started in a way that allows people to be more specific and more selective when it comes to their clients. But yet, even then, Frank, they don't push them away. They take them all. And my research showed, creating this book, that the business owners I interview, they knew they shouldn't take the client.
Yeah.
They knew of the red flags. They saw the red flags, but they never acted on them. And that was a big issue because they always, I use a strong word, regretted it, but I wouldn't say everybody I talked to used that word regret, but they always learned from that decision and ultimately started to trust their gut a lot more. Mm-hmm. With the consistent repetition of bringing on clients, they built a pattern of trust in their own mind, their own heart, and their own gut. And ultimately, that led them into to picking better clients. But I still even see this as a business coach now, a referral coach. I still see this now where people don't have a very specific target market that they're focused on. And when they go into that target market, they have to, that's more of their ideal client. They know more about the industry. They know more about the economics of the industry. They know more about the struggles of the industry. And so they can speak the language to that specific industry better. So if you're a web designer out there and you're building websites for just anybody and everybody, you're doing yourself a disservice by not finding the target market, by not choosing lawyers to work with or electricians or contractors or GCs or paving companies, whatever it might be. When you pick one of those, you can spend your marketing dollars and go into that market very directly. You can build direct mail pieces and and online digital ads focused on those markets. You can find those people a lot better, and you can speak the language to them. And then you understand the struggles that they have. And so you are less likely to end up with bad clients, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then when you get some of these clients where, okay, you think you have a good client, but it turns out they're not a good client. Well, why are they not a good client? Maybe it's because the number of employees they have isn't high enough to afford your service overall, because they don't have the revenue to match that. And you didn't know that going into it. But now you know, okay, I need a minimum number of 10 employees. One of my clients, we've got her dialed in on realtors, working with realtors as a social media manager. But it's not just any realtor, it's realtors who are doing 24 transactions or more per year. That means a realtor is doing 2 transactions per month, which eliminates 95% of the realtors out there.
Right.
So it all of a sudden has defined her market for her even more, right? Instead of just saying it's realtors, it's now realtors with 24 transactions a year or more. So when she's looking for business, she can be more intentional. And when you're more intentional, you become the person who's shooting fish in a barrel, which is way better. You know, I talk about that axiom in the book and how you can get more clients that way. And this is how you get through that first 5 years of business, Frank, right? That the statistical failures that the SBA talks about with all these small businesses that fail in the first 5 years. And you get through it by going as narrow as you can into a specific field, as niche as you can into what you actually do, and focusing on the relationship side of things and getting referrals into these segments. And ultimately, that is going to lead you to your ideal client. And when your ideal client comes through the door, many times, most times, they're the most profitable ones. Not always, but most times they're the most profitable ones.
Yeah, and I'll let you speak to this, but my experience was, and for those who don't know, I used to practice law, is that, it started out, you're grabbing everything, and then you get those ideal clients. And once you kind of hone in on that, you just get more and more of it. I mean, I stopped getting the crap clients. And it wasn't, I still felt like I needed money. I still felt like I needed to succeed, but the good clients then lead you to other clients, right? I have a good client, they would refer me to somebody else who was good. And it daisy chained from one to the next.
Because you get more of the same.
Yeah.
People refer more of who they are, right? And so if you're working with Pop Warner football teams, you're going to get more Pop Warner. That's how I got my start with the digital marketing agencies. My first ever paying client was a Pop Warner football team. And next thing you know, I ended up with 7 of them.
Right.
When we did work for Toys for Tots, we started with 1. Next thing you know, we had 49 of them or something like that, And so that happens. And so, when you get bad clients, they refer bad clients, right? They refer people like them. And so if these people are price shoppers and that's what makes them a bad client, then they're probably, not all the time, but sometimes they're going to be referring bad clients in the form of price shoppers as well. And that's why it's so important to dial in on that ideal client and what you define as, because listen, I don't define your ideal client and you don't define mine. We all have different reasons by which, I could take a coaching client on right now. And if they walked in the door and said, Matt, I will pay 10 times what you charge, but I need to have a recurring appointment every Monday at 10 a.m., I would not take it. Because for me, that line is freedom.
Right.
And that request blocks that freedom. It's not about the money for me. For other people, they might make the exception and they might say, you know what, I'll take that Monday 10 a.m. call.
Right.
But that's not, I wouldn't feel good about that. And I think that ultimately what we did in this book was really look at, and I say we because I interviewed so many small business owners, and I looked at all the different ways in which they building their business and how successful they were and all this. And I looked at all the stuff that I had done. And I gave people these, there's 5 phases in the book, and I gave the reader ways to move out of these phases and stages if they found themselves in it while they were reading the book. Hey, if you're in this stage, here's a few things you can do to accelerate to the next stage. Because the biggest thing, Frank, is that the very first stage, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, well, I created the ideal client hierarchy of needs.
Right.
And it's this, the stages of moving up this ladder. And the very first one is survival mode, which is why we take on those clients, because we need money.
Yeah.
The next one's security, which is the goal of security mode is to get to a predictable level of recurring revenue in the business. We need to know how much money is coming in every month. And until we know that, we won't take risks. And small business owners, people less than 20 employees, define not taking a client or firing a client as taking a risk. And so we won't do that until we know that we have a predictable amount of money coming in every month. And so we have to look at our business and say, what can we do now to make a predictable amount of revenue come in every month? And sometimes that's a subscription plan in your business. Sometimes that's just taking a big dollar item that you would charge, and instead of charging one time, you break it up over 12 months and give the customer payments. There's lots of different ways you can do that. Maybe you got to create a new product or service in your business. But you need predictable income every month in order to be willing to take the risk to not take on these clients, because that's the ultimate issue, is that people take on the client because they feel like they need the money.
Well, let's walk through, a hypothetical. I guess there's 2 hypotheticals. One, you have the client and that you essentially need to fire. And then the second is the one that you're being preemptive and just saying no from the get-go. I mean, how do those conversations sound? I assume you talked about those in the book.
Yeah. So, I give a couple examples of things to look out for and examples of stories that people I interviewed, and everybody had a different story for sure. I guess we'll take the first one first, which is, how do you fire a client, right? Yep. How do you, I think you identify first the client that you need to fire because they cause you anxiety, right?
Yep.
You are spending more time talking about this client than you are doing anything else. That client needs to be fired. I don't care how much revenue they bring in, they need to be fired. Now, whether or not you'll act on it will determine how much revenue they're bringing in, right? If they're bringing in a ton of revenue, if they're a whale in your company and they're bringing in 60 or 70% of your revenue, you're not going to fire them, right? I'm not that naive to believe that you will, but we've got to then replace the revenue so that you can then fire them, right? So if you're talking about this client on a regular basis, they need to be fired. Full stop. They need to be fired, because 20% of your clients taking up 80% of your time is a problem. Yeah. Right. So how do you fire them? Hey, you've outgrown me. Hey, Frank, you've outgrown me. Let me see if I can place you with somebody that can service your needs a little bit more. That's step 1.
Yep.
Another option is, I think we've gotten to the point where I've helped you as far as I can. And so I think it's probably good that we end at the end of this month, right? Same concept of, you've outgrown me. I've gotten you as far as I can. Would you like me to help you find someone that could take you to the next level? That's the option 2. Option 3 is, we're just not a good fit anymore. So if I tend to be a direct person and you want to use that line, we're not a good fit anymore, and end it there, right? So that's how you fire an existing client, right? I'm at capacity, I can't take on anymore, type of thing. How do you not bring on the bad client that you've recognized?
I think that's probably easier.
It's a lot easier, but it's harder than you think, because you have to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to trust yourself. You have to trust that everything will be okay, even if you don't take this client on. And until you start doing this, you won't create a pattern and a history to look back on. And so you'll always think that you're making the wrong decision. But if you do it and you move on, when you look back on this, you'll realize I made the right choice. And it will be easier the second time to do it. It'll be easier the third time to do it. And again, what you say is, I'm not sure we're a good fit. Look, I had this recently on a podcast. I wasn't even selling anything. There's no monetary transaction, but I was requested to be a guest on a podcast, and they did a pre-interview call. And in the pre-interview call, they were asking me all these questions about how I use podcasting to grow my business. It was very sales-oriented questions.
Right.
And as I was doing some research, I realized, this is a service that they sell. So I immediately caught on to this, and I realized it's a bit of a bait and switch. And I simply said to the guy, I think it's great that these pre-interview calls are great because they help us understand if we're a good fit. And based on some things you've said, I think I'm probably not a good fit for your podcast. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you have a good night. And that was the end of the conversation. And so I think you have to be willing to part ways. When it comes to being a service provider, remember one thing, and this is a sales conversation piece that I always talk to my clients about. They need you more than you need them.
Yep.
Even if you're broke and you need them more than they need you, right, you have to think of it as though they need you more than you need them. And that gives you the upper hand mentally to be able to push away the client when you feel like it's not a good fit. And obviously, the easiest way to push them away is to refer them to someone else who you think might be a good fit. And I'm not talking about pawning somebody off in a negative way. I'm going to give them to my competition. Yeah, let's take them. That's not what this is, right? This is more like, hey, I'm not a good fit. Maybe this person over here would be, right? And if you serve a target market, then it'll be a lot easier for you to say that you're not a good fit because you'll realize that this person is not in that target market.
Gotcha. Let's shift gears here. Let's the book's coming out. Buy the book, The High Five Effect: How to Do Business with People Who Bring You Joy. It's out there wherever you can find books. Matt Ward's got other books out there as well. How else can people help you?
Well, so the book launch is coming out October 26th. That's when the book will go live. They can get it pre-ordered on high5effect.com. That'll take them right to the website where they can order the hard copy there. The hardcover book is only available on the pre-order. For me, just spreading the word on the book, right? So I think this is probably my life's work, right? It's where it's at. And I think it's a great, I guess I'm biased because I wrote it. But the people that have reviewed it, I've got some great small business endorsements from it, and some very popular small business authors that have endorsed it. And I'm super excited about it. I think it can help a lot of small business owners, and I'm so thankful for that. Obviously, if anybody wants to check me out or find me, they can find me on breakthrough-champion.com and on all social media, out there. Matt Ward Speaks, pretty much that's my handle in most places. So,
yep. And you can learn more about the book at high5effect.com.
That's right.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time on the program today.
Thank you, Frank, for having me. I appreciate it. And don't forget to live happy, smile a lot, and high five everyone around you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.